Nick Chubb signs an awesome contract extension, but with Kareem Hunt under contract, can Nick Chubb be a top 5 dynasty running back? That and more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co-host, Chris Allen. Chris, where are we at on Nick Chubb going forward?
Do I think that he can be like the RB1 and not in Dynasty, right? At this point in his career, the age thing is always going to be counted against him. Running backs on their second contract, like studies have been shown, like I've shown like how the hit rates associated with running backs in that stage of the career as well, not all too great. But at the very least, we do know the type of workload that Nick Chubb is going to get moving forward, and also the offense that he's going to be a part of. I think like our colleague here at Footballguys, Sigmund Bloom, I think his tweet earlier today after the news was like officially official was that like he's the best fit for that type of offense.
Right. And then Matt Wallman says best running back period or something like
that. Yeah. And for some folks, I mean, that is an excellent, like, I guess, talking point or debate to have in terms of like who is like the best like pure rusher in the league, because since we always put our fantasy goggles on and that's how we typically view running backs, like from a fantasy perspective, how much production they're giving to us, how much their fantasy production they're creating for our fantasy teams, it's difficult to separate those two sides of things, like the real NFL portion and then the fantasy portion of it. But I do agree with Waldman. Like from a pure rushing standpoint, I do think Chubb is one of the best pure rushers in the league. But regardless, looking at Chubb like moving forward from a dynasty perspective, I mean, what are we supposed to do in terms of like his current ranking right now? I mean, I can't really see him moving up, right? Because we do know that his limited pass catching role within that offense we don't see that expanding. We don't see him getting any younger, any faster, anything like that. But at the hope would be that he doesn't wind up missing a significant portion of the season this season as opposed to last year. But regardless, like sustained production moving forward. We do know at least he has a stable contract or a stable situation to move forward with. Don't see Kevin Stefanski going anywhere. We'll have to see about because Baker's contract should be up in 2 years? If I'm not mistaken.
They just took the 5th year, so next year.
No, next year rather. Yeah, so next year. So we want to see like what they're going to wind up doing with Baker, which they could be coming to a crossroads with him and seeing what's going to happen with Baker. But regardless, that offense as a whole, I mean, top 12 in terms of rushing EPA last season, and a massive improvement from the year beforehand when they had the complete train wreck with Freddie Kitchens and whatnot. So, and also investments in the offensive line, like over the offseason. So it's just that team can continue to improve in that specific area and give Chubb, at the very least, top 24, if not top 12 rushing production over the next 2 seasons, which again, if you are currently contending, have Nick Chubb on your roster, you're absolutely happy at this point because at least you know that your championship window should at least extend over the next 2, maybe 3 seasons, depending on what they do at the quarterback position. But regardless, I mean, Nick Chubb should be at least one of your, I guess, foundational assets of your roster if you've been holding on to him for this long so far.
All right, let's bring in the blurb. Nick Chubb reportedly agreed to terms on a 3-year contract extension worth $36.6 million, including $20 million guaranteed, according to Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. Chris, I'm the type of person, if you've got time, you want to talk about dynasty running backs with me. If you don't have time, don't say the words, because I can go on forever and ever and ever about how I feel about dynasty running backs. So the show's going to be called, Can He Be a Top 5 Running Back? But I don't really care except if he's on the 1st or 2nd year of his rookie contract, because that's all I want. That's all I care about. So here we go with the Derrick Henry decision point. Everybody drink. We've mentioned it this episode, mentioned it last episode. So from now on, shots all around when you hear Derrick Henry decision point. But you've got the same thing with Nick Chubb here. So you said it. His value is not going down. I teased it a little bit earlier that Kareem Hunt is still in town.
Right.
Now, if you go look at his contract, the Cleveland Browns can save about $6 million against the cap if they cut Kareem Hunt before June 1st. But, we always think teams are going to cut these players. It doesn't happen nearly as much as you would think. I mean, conversation about cutting Melvin Gordon made no sense And here he is looking like the running back one ahead of our beloved Javonte Williams
Right.
so far in training camp. Early, sure, but it doesn't always happen how we want it to happen. So I thought that when the Cleveland Browns took a chance on Kareem Hunt, they were just going to flip him for a profit in 2021 or sorry, 2020. And Kareem Hunt did well for, I don't even want to call him a backup. I mean, he's probably a top 20-ish
Thereabout. Yeah.
in the NFL, and he's playing behind a top 5 or 6 or 7 back. So maybe the Browns are smart and we're not. Maybe maybe Kareem Hunt has done more for their team than what they could have traded him for had they have just taken a chance on a guy that was in a tough place. He got himself into a bad situation, might have been booted from the league. They said, you know what, we'll give you a chance. And it's paid off. It didn't pay off the way we thought it would, but here they are being essentially enamored with Kareem Hunt. We were talking about before the show, does the NFL view Kareem Hunt as a productive player? And you made a good point. If there were trade offers for Kareem Hunt, they probably would have leaked it. You know, the Browns or somebody would have leaked that there are offers for Kareem Hunt, just how the NFL works. So we didn't hear about that. So maybe the NFL doesn't value Kareem Hunt, but I tell you what, the Cleveland Browns do value Kareem Hunt. So you're going to have pretty much from Nick Chubb what you've had in the past. I don't see Kareem Hunt leaving next year, and that means that we're going to get a limited pass catching role from Nick Chubb. Now, don't get it twisted. He can be productive in the pass game.
Yeah.
He's just not asked to be productive in the pass game. I mean, Kareem Hunt probably better in the pass game. Kareem Hunt's better than a lot of people in the pass game. So, you know, he does carry that almost reverse handcuff value where if Kareem Hunt goes down, Nick Chubb instant boost. But you can't rely on that. So can he be a top 5 back in Dynasty? No, I don't believe he can. He's going to get to that age where it's just he's too I don't want to say old, and he hasn't gotten too many touches, but he's just going to be too up there for been around too long is almost what I want to say, because the age doesn't really matter. It's just you get to a point in Dynasty where the other managers in your league are just like, nah, I've seen that guy's name too much. I'm not trading for him.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of times it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't make sense with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's probably going to have another monster season, but you're not going to get much value in a trade for Derrick Henry right now.
Mhm.
And it's probably going to be the same thing for Nick Chubb. So he gets this excellent contract. If you have Nick Chubb on your roster, you're excited because second contracts don't always look good for running backs. As a matter of fact, they usually don't look good for a running back. I almost want to get rid of my running backs before a second contract is even in the question, because you usually see them go to another team a la, sorry, but Leonard Fournette.
Right.
And they're not going to be utilized the way, you know, he went from a 300 touch back or something insane to a timeshare. And how often can we say that happens? How many times do running backs go to their second team and just become irrelevant? So it's good that he got the extension before you needed to worry about it. But if he's on your roster, you're either deciding I'm going to hold now, or this is probably the hype that you needed to not get out from under him. He's an incredibly productive back, but to get the best value that you could possibly get, you would have to trade him like right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Because think about it from a pure hypothetical situation. So let's say this season, let's say Chubb walks right back into his role that he had back in 2019, where he had 300 some odd, like 300 touches and like 1,400 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say even better for Chubb, let's say Kareem Hunt gets injured, and now it really is all of Nick Chubb. So now let's say we're not going to put him at 400 touches, but let's say 350, 375 touches. And he winds up being the rushing title holder for the NFL at the end of this year.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going to be the reaction from dynasty managers if that scenario were to happen? Oh, he's now 26 years old, coming off of 375 touches, extra mileage. I mean, his value, like even if he winds up having a Derrick Henry season, we're not going to value that after the fact it's going to be used as a negative, like for his value. So unless he becomes an ultra efficient running back, like we're talking Alvin Kamara, like unless he completely shifts the way that he's used in that offense and how he produces on the ground, there is no way that his value is going to suddenly increase past where he's currently being valued at, which in most cases is probably in Dynasty, let's say RB 12-ish, somewhere in there. I would put him around like Zeke Elliott, which is like essentially like in the same area. I mean, or in the same stage of his career as well, on a second contract, 26 years old, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So I would say they're fairly comparable, but obviously since Zeke plays in the more dynamic offense, we would probably value Zeke a bit higher. But same deal with Zeke. So let's say even after this season, Dak goes nuclear, 500 passing yards per game. Zeke gets back up to, he catches 60, 70 passes, combined touchdowns. Like he has like Aaron Jones level, like number of touchdowns, like 19 touchdowns or something like that. At the end of the season, Zeke's value in Dynasty is not going up because we're going to look at that usage and we're going to say, oh, he's 26, going on 27. Ain't no way he's going to be able to hit this again. So even that RB12 value that he's currently sitting at right now, they'll probably wind up ticking back a few slots just because of the usage, the way that they're used on the field, the age that they're going to currently be at. We're not going to see that value appreciate. So I think, Adam, you laid out the great case for if you wanted to entertain offers at this point in order to maximize his trade value, now would be the time to look at the other folks in your league and see if you can start to recycle some of Nick Chubb's value for something that could at least give your teams like similar production, or at the very least more sustained production for more years moving forward at similar value.
And with the Ezekiel Elliott comp to Nick Chubb, I will say for anybody that wants to hold on to Nick Chubb, the good news is that there's not a target on Nick Chubb's back every offseason like there is for Zeke. That monstrosity of a contract that Ezekiel Elliott holds is a target on his back every offseason. So every offseason you roster Zeke, do the Cowboys have this much money? And fortunately for Zeke, they structured it in a way where it's difficult to get rid of him. But still, you look at that price tag every year and say, should we be paying this for a running back? Or Tony Pollard steps up even more. Do we really need to pay Zeke? I mean, even if it's I don't know his contract off the top of my head to a T, but even if it's $6 million in dead cap instead of the 11, 12, 13 they owe him, and Tony Pollard could even maybe outproduce him. In an efficiency standpoint, he wasn't far off that last year. I believe in some statistical measures, Tony Pollard was above Ezekiel Elliott. So, so in a sense, every year you have to kind of stress as a manager for Ezekiel Elliott because he has that monster price tag. Nick Chubb's contract is fine. Some would view it as a hometown discount. If I were a running back in the NFL, this is the type of contract I would keep. It's fair, it's good money, and it's not a target on your back, every single year. Am I going to get cut because I'm making too much money, which is really sad that the players have to deal with that, as much money as the NFL brings in, but that's the nature of the game. You get paid a lot of money. You need to live up to that money every year, or they're going to figure out how to get rid of you one way or another. They'll trade you, they'll cut you, they'll make you take, Jamison Crowder had to take more than a 50% pay cut to stay on his team, even though he was under contract, So that's good news for Nick Chubb. You don't have to stress about him every year. He's probably going to be with the Browns. And like I mentioned, Kareem Hunt could be gone next year pretty easily. We don't know that he will be, but it's quite possible.
Right. So the moral of the story is parents of kids that are interested in football, don't let your kids grow up to be running backs.
Nope.
Have them be quarterbacks, wide receivers, literally any other position.
Literally anything else. Running back is brutal from a business standpoint. So you've tuned into the Dynasty Newsletter. You're wondering where these blurbs come from. You could probably scroll through Twitter nonstop all day and you would catch them all, but nobody has time for that. So if you want to know where we get our blurbs from every week to provide to you, it's the Football Guys email list put together by our own Joe Bryant, Cecil Lammy, Sigmund Bloom. They get that to your email inbox every single day with all the latest news for fantasy football, and even some defense gets put in there. So if you're just an overall football fan, still tune in. And then when you want to know how that affects your dynasty rosters, check us out on Monday nights, and we will talk about all the blurbs that might affect your dynasty rosters. So here's a effect on our dynasty rosters that I really don't know where to go with, but Deshaun Watson's participating in practice, according to Steve Weish, NFL Network. Chris, you look so excited to discuss this. Let's get going.
Man, it is just, I guess, the new CBA that they wound up negotiating.
Yeah, like $50K a day, right?
This whole, having to be there, and like the team can't waive the fines, like that stipulation and all that. They clearly didn't have a situation like this in mind, because it's awkward.
Incredibly, he's not even playing quarterback.
It is really awkward. It has to be awkward for the team, has to be awkward for the players. I guess regardless of what you think about Deshaun Watson, you have to think that it's awkward for him as well.
Oh yeah,
because it's just, how do you what are you supposed to say? What are you supposed to do? And clearly, this, like, you can see how much like the team is enthusiastic about him being there, considering what he's running with the scout team, lining up at safety. I mean, just basically just kind of
get off the field, man.
It's like, if you're not going to be a part of the team at this point, like, he's literally a distraction. Because now, like, anytime they go out onto the field, somebody has to report on him, because he's a high profile player currently involved in legal issues. So they have to report on him. But that distracts from, I haven't heard really much of anything about Nico Collins and how he's coming along in the offense, what we even think about Davis Mills. I've seen maybe like 2 or 3 tweets about Davis Mills, and they're not good, but it's just ones. And like, or how like Brandon Cooks is coming along, having to work with a rookie quarterback this year, or even a veteran quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. It's just, none of that stuff is there. Like, this story now permeates the news cycle that would be of most use to us. And it's forced upon us by the fact that the CBA is put in place where players can't just be away from the team, and the team can't waive the fines that would be associated with it. So it's just a really bizarre situation. And regardless of the legal ramifications with Deshaun Watson and the allegations against him, it just puts the whole cycle of news where we're getting just constant updates from, like, the Eagles and Devonta Smith's injury and Lamar Jackson, which we'll talk about later, up-to-date information from every team. But the only thing we're hearing about the Texans is this. And any other stuff is not all that great to begin with. So, like, even though we were already down on the Texans, we're not even getting anything to even provide just even a minuscule or like an iota of optimism about the team, because just so much of the news cycle centers on this. So much of the news cycle is centered on something that honestly could possibly just be avoided if Goodell would just step in and put him on the commissioner's exempt list, and he wouldn't be there at all. But it's just the way that their justice system, quote unquote, works. We'll just never really see that. So it puts us all in limbo as we try and figure out what to do with not just Deshaun Watson, but the rest of the Texans as a whole.
I've got qualms with the Texans. I've got qualms with the NFL. Of course, qualms with Deshaun Watson. The first, the Texans. You signed some odd 40 free agents, veterans, players the caliber of, I like Chris Conley, but Chris Conley, a role player when you need a contributor at wide receiver. You've got rookies in Nico Collins that you're expecting a lot from. Did a whole show on him. And you let Deshaun Watson come show up to practice knowing he wants to get traded and play scout team. For one, you need to trade him for as much as possible. And he's touching the field on scout team. For two, you've got 40 free agents that you need to create a culture for. And you have your star quarterback playing on defense. How does that get out? How do you let a reporter see that, film that, report that? That's embarrassing. That's fireable, in my opinion. So then you have the NFL. I mean, they're all over the place, always on things like this. You will never get consistency. Don't look at past cases. It does not matter. It's a case-by-case basis. There is no rhyme or reason to any of this. Okay, so the allegations are brutal on Deshaun Watson, and somehow he's at practice playing scout team.
Right.
That's what's the exempt list for. Say the 1% chance that he is completely innocent of these 20 plus allegations, you still had plenty of reason to have him on the exempt list until you figure it out. It's not innocent until proven guilty, because NFL is all about PR. It's not the justice. It's not the American justice system. It's about PR. So obviously bad PR. Go ahead and put him on the exempt list. That fixes everything for everyone, because Deshaun Watson doesn't want to be there, clearly, and the Texans don't want him to be there.
Right.
And I can't imagine he's gotten zero harassment from teammates, given the situation. Plenty of people believe, all of the allegations, and maybe they rightfully so. There's no way no one has said anything to him. So this whole situation is just a massive, massive headache. And I don't understand what we should do with Deshaun Watson on our dynasty rosters, because the NFL doesn't know what to do. I will say we tend to take situations like this where players get themselves in legal trouble, and it never sticks as long as we think it will. For example, Tyreek Hill, with his situation with his son and his, I believe, fiance, he was being traded for third round picks, being traded for, players that probably aren't in the NFL anymore at the time. And then Mecole Hardman got drafted way too early to fill the Tyreek Hill role, and then it was solidified. It's like done. Okay. So, and now we have Tyreek Hill in the first round, maybe early second round of dynasty startups with the age factor. And that was a time to capitalize. So as disgusting as it feels to try to separate, and don't separate the personal matters if you don't want to. I mean, you play dynasty however you want. But if the NFL is going to try so hard to not even put Deshaun Watson on the exempt list, then it's time to go trade at a discount for Deshaun Watson. Because if they have to get their teeth pulled to put him on the exempt list, how surprised are you if Deshaun Watson gets traded and plays this year? At this point, I'm not. If you asked me before training camp, I would have said 0%. 0%. Any day now he's going on the exempt list. But here he is playing safety at Texans training camp. Okay. So, I mean, if people are still thinking that he's going to miss the season, if people are still thinking that he's going to maybe even serve time, I mean, we have Drew Davenport over at Footballguys who covers the case extensively all the time on his Twitter feed. If you want to go read that, he has way better insight on that. My opinion is that Deshaun Watson's career is not even close to over. It probably is just beginning with a new organization for years and years and years to come. So you probably trade for him, close your eyes, grit your teeth, whatever you have to do, depending on how your personal feelings affect your roster moves. And unfortunately, you probably profit in the long term.
Which is the unfortunate part. And that's where the reality of life, football, fantasy football, it all kind of intersects. And it's where your pain tolerance, risk tolerance, I mean, all of that like comes into play. And if you're completely out on Deshaun Watson at this point, totally understand. If you're more of you separate the two and you just look at them as just movable assets in a portfolio, a whole other way of looking at it. That's another viable way to do it. But that would be where you would see Watson as a depreciating asset that doesn't have any shot, at least as of right now, at having his career ended. Only 26 years old at this point, or not even 26, if I'm not mistaken. So it's entirely possible that he winds up moving to a separate organization, been linked to nothing but at least positive organizations so far, Eagles, Miami. So at the very least, we'll see what Miami, or at least what Philly might have to offer now, considering they might not have that first round pick they thought they were going to get for Wentz.
I know. We'll get to that later.
That changes that dynamic, but still, it's just, you have to make that decision like on your own. At least I wouldn't, with the way that the current legal ramifications and all that, it'd be difficult to try and provide advice on something like that. But still, we're trying to at least look at things from an objective standpoint. At best, as of right now, looks like he'll probably miss a significant part of this season, but he looks to still have at least a productive on-field career ahead of him somewhere other than Houston.
Yep. Totally fair assessment of the situation. Now the Houston Texans did get a roster move done, though not the one that they probably should have. Randall Cobb has been traded to Green Bay as part of the re- concessions, is what we're calling it, for Aaron
Yes,
Rodgers.
we messed up.
That was smart of Aaron Rodgers. He knew he needed weapons. He knew that the team has not provided him weapons in the draft. I mean, Amari Rodgers, okay, like Amari Rodgers isn't Justin Jefferson, who we wanted. Not even close. Amari Rodgers is a wide receiver, who I happen to think can be a productive wide receiver in this league. But Amari Rodgers was not concessions for the Jordan Love pick in the slightest. They would have taken Amari Rodgers in the third round, regardless of what was happening with their organization. So you tried to bring Alan Lazard back, MVS back. Amari Rodgers was going to play a huge role as a third round rookie. And Aaron Rodgers said, look, you're going to pay me. You're going to get me out of my contract in 2022. Or I believe that they have to trade him.
I believe that's the case.
And you're going to get me Randall Cobb. And old Goot over there did not seem too enthused on trading for Randall Cobb after letting him walk. That's a big uh-oh on his part, and now he has to see every time that Randall Cobb goes and scores a touchdown, which will probably be plenty given their rapport. It's going to be bittersweet for him. So what do you think about Randall Cobb? Any dynasty value you picking him off waivers, anything of the sort?
Absolutely. I mean, picking them up off waivers. I mean, if you're going to wind up having a player on your bench that you can stick in at the flex position, almost in the exact same way that we were talking about Cole Beasley, like over the last couple of weeks, I think Randall Cobb at least falls into that same type of category, like an aging asset that would sit on your roster with flex viable weeks, touchdown upside or touchdown volatility associated with him on a weekly basis because of the quarterback that he plays with, the offense that they currently run. If they run the same type of offense they did in 2020, I mean, Randall Cobb, I mean, at least the range of outcomes for him could be close to 5 or 6 touchdowns on the season, just considering how much they were passing in the red zone and how often Aaron Rodgers was connecting in the red zone, which was absolutely ridiculous. So even though from an analytical standpoint, since y'all know that's how I approach it, from an analytical standpoint, of course, I expect Aaron Rodgers to regress from his 9.1 touchdown rate, a 9.1% touchdown rate. I expect him to regress from this is a stat I was actually looking up for a piece I just wrote. He converted a touchdown on 41% of his throws in the red zone. That is ridiculous. So if all of that is still set to regress, at least still we can see the opportunity for Randall Cobb coming back to Green Bay. We at least know the connection between him and Rodgers should still be there. It's just now what that means for the rest of the guys that are there, like Amari Rodgers, and like you were just talking about. We're expecting at least his rookie season to at least, I don't know, maybe not necessarily completely tanked, but we don't see the same role from him as we did prior to, because Randall Cobb plays 85 to 90% of his snaps out of the slot. That's where Amari Rodgers played primarily in college. So don't really see much of a role for him. Davante Adams, we already know he's the wide receiver one. Really, it just comes down to Alan Lazard and MVS rotating at the split end position, opposite Davante Adams. So, which Lazard can do. Typically, that's been MVS's role, but at least those guys at least offer more flexibility so that we can at least see them seeing more offensive snaps. So, I think it's more about Rodgers still having that connection with Cobb, and I think that at least boosts his value to the point where, yeah, I'll keep him on the back end of my roster for sure.
And the problem with the Allen Lazard and MVS situation is that Valdez-Scantling and Lazard do very different things, and both are required for the offense, which means it's going to be probably close to a 50-50 split based on formation, based on field position, parts of the game. Are you coming back? Are you playing possession ball? Alan Lazard would be way, way more productive, in my opinion, in possession ball. So
2-minute drill, all that stuff.
Sure. So good luck picking one to actually start. That's why we play best ball, right? I mean, I'll take either of them in best ball, who's ever I'm feeling like that day. I think Allen Lazard is the better all-around receiver. You probably put your best foot forward with Lazard, Adams, and Cobb on the field. But for different situations, I would see, I'm sure Amari Rodgers will still get sprinkled in, especially with Randall Cobb being 30 now, which he seems like he's 39. But and then you're also going to see MVS and Lazard kind of split. So in Dynasty, it's really difficult for me to give any actionable advice on Lazard or MVS. The only thing I will say is I think talent prevails in the end, and I do think that Allen Lazard is the more talented receiver of the two. But I'll also say that my best ball exposure is much higher on MVS. So good luck making that pick. I'll roster any pass catchers from this offense if there's a discount because Aaron Rodgers is going to leave next year. I'd like to think that they're going to take this year to put a plan in place. Hopefully Jordan Love takes a step forward. There's no way that they could have taken him in the first round and not give him the keys to the kingdom next year. So maybe it's time to buy a dip on all of those players and maybe even buy the dip on Jordan Love. So if you're like Aaron Rodgers and you want to put your money where your mouth is, we've got the FBG Player Championship over at FFPC. That's a $350 buy-in. So go over there, show how much you've been listening to all the new shows on YouTube, and we've got even more coming out before the season. So if you want to put your money in where your mouth is, test your metal, go over there. It's a large entry, and it's one that you definitely want to be a part of because that top prize is, I believe, 500,000.
Okay.
Yeah. So 350 looks scary, right? But then you see the grand prize and you can enter multiple entries. So I'll definitely have a few spots in that best ball tournament. So we're going to have a lot of this to talk about, Chris. Lamar Jackson test positive for COVID-19, according to Noah Trister, the Associated Press. We can't talk about every single player that's going to test positive for COVID-19. But we can talk about this dynamic that we have in the NFL this season where you basically have a split between the unvaccinated players are basically playing in 2020 all over again, and the vaccinated players get all of these basically freedoms. Like it gets to be all normal for these guys. Or as a matter of fact, the main thing is just that they only have like 3 days. So you can't really count them out of your roster just because they popped on the COVID protocol list. However, if you're one of the players that have not gotten vaccinated, you're counting them out for at least 10 days. Big difference. The fact that Lamar Jackson, here's the whole deal with it. The fact that Lamar Jackson's on the 10-day is dead giveaway to everybody that he did not get vaccinated. That's just what people are doing. I mean, I can't guarantee it, and I'm not trying to guarantee it. But the reason people are getting scared of Kirk Cousins, of Lamar Jackson, Cole Beasley, very vocal about his stance, is because they're worried about the 10-day. And it's not just 10 days, it's at least 10 days plus 2 negative COVID tests in a row. So it's not super easy to get off the COVID list. And that means if the player was not vaccinated and they have COVID now, they might have trouble all year. So people are looking at this as a dead giveaway that player is going to be a problem all year because anytime they get in close contact with a player, sitting out. It doesn't matter if they got COVID or not. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic that we have to battle through all year. How often is it going to be a Lamar Jackson caliber player? Probably not very often. But we do have a problem with Lamar Jackson getting integrated with Tylan Wallace and Rashad Bateman and Sammy Watkins if he's on the COVID list already.
Exactly. And that's really the problem associated with this. It's the hope is that he either makes the choice to get vaccinated or at least puts enough protocols into his personal life such that he won't be in close contact and we won't have to deal with it like during the season. But that's the big thing, right? Like not having your primary quarterback, a quarterback that plays in a certain way, because it's not like let's say with the Colts where losing Carson Wentz, which we'll talk about later, and moving to Jacob Eason, it's really just a drop-off in talent, right? You're moving from at least a semi-accurate and capable quarterback in Carson Wentz to Jacob Eason, who's really like untried or untested in like actual game situations. But moving from Lamar Jackson to whomever the backups that they're trying to use in Baltimore right now.
McSorley.
Yeah, that's a
Brett Utley.
a 100% stylistic difference to what you would expect on the field, because we're expecting Lamar Jackson there week 1
Mm-hmm.
all the way through week 17 and hopefully into the playoffs. And to try and recreate what Lamar can do, those guys can't do that. And so how the like where to expect passes and like the timing associated with it, Sammy Watkins might be able to adjust because he just played with one of the best that's currently in the league.
Mm-hmm.
But for the rookies, for the guy, like especially for Bateman in particular, I mean, Bateman, where he wins on the field is exactly where Lamar Jackson has been historically most inefficient, on those timing routes, those out routes, those dig routes, those curl routes, those routes that really could wind up extending drives, because when it comes to those 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 situations where Lamar Jackson would typically wind up running, he could look for a guy like Bateman in order to convert that first down, instead of having to, scramble around for a minute in the pocket, do one of those like Russell Wilson pirouettes in the backfield, and then like run for, 8, 9, 10 yards and convert. It could be Bateman, but unless he has that timing, unless he gets in those reps with him, like right now during training camp, we're less likely to see that at the beginning of the season. And it'll probably take 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks in order for us to really see Bateman as the centerpiece of that offense, because we've already tried making Marquise Brown like the wide receiver 1 in the offense. Didn't work. I mean, we tried for like multiple weeks, even after what was it, down the back half of the season, where his target share skyrocketed past 25%, 30%, scoring a touchdown every week, barely cracked the top 24 in wide receiver scoring on a weekly basis.
Yep.
I mean, we're not really trying to crown Sammy Watkins the wide receiver 1 of the Baltimore Ravens right now. Not doing it. I mean, we don't care about, or we care less about Devin Duvernay, Miles Boykin, role players. So it really does come down to Bateman, like really ascending to that position, unless we're ready to say that Mark Andrews is going to essentially be like the Travis Kelce of the Baltimore Ravens. So unless Lamar Jackson is there, this is that time for them to get that like connection down. This is that time for them to get integrated together, understand each other's like patterns and how like Bateman runs routes and when Lamar Jackson needs to hit him on those routes and all that. So without it, I'm really struggling to see how the Baltimore Ravens really like at least come out of the gate swinging. I can still see them like winning the division. I can still see them like getting to the playoffs by the end of the season, but it's going to be much harder for them to get there if Lamar is, on the COVID-19 list.
And you can't rely on Mark Andrews to be the Travis Kelce of the offense, because need I remind everybody that they still have Nick Boyle, who's probably one of the top blocking tight ends in the NFL, and nobody ever understands why he's on the field. Why is he on the field? Because the focal point of that offense is Lamar Jackson, it's J.K. Dobbins, it's Gus Edwards. Who helps those three? Nick Boyle. So if you're on Mark Andrews for his efficiency, for his red zone production, all fair. But that 45% snap share is probably not going up for Mark Andrews. Unless they start running more 2 tight end sets, it's probably going to be just about equal Nick Boyle as you get Mark Andrews, and you're just hoping that Mark Andrews is incredibly efficient. So you can't even rely on Mark Andrews to be the focal point of that offense, because he's not on the field much more than 50% of the time. So you're stuck with Rashad Bateman. And Rashad Bateman is going to get to his spot. That's what he does well. He's a big body receiver. He's going to catch the ball in contested situations, and he's a pretty solid route runner for his size. So if you're going to get Lamar Jackson on board with more of those, like you said, the out routes are the worst part of Lamar Jackson's game. He's actually pretty efficient everywhere else, even though everybody swears to goodness he isn't, because he can run so well. But those out routes are where you need the timing that they will not be getting, because Lamar Jackson is on the COVID list, and we might be talking about this with ample other players. I mean, Kirk Cousins doesn't have anybody to really develop with at present. It's the exact
Come on,
same
Emmer
offense.
Smith-Marset. Come on, man.
It's the exact same offense as last year, aside from some role players. You lost Kyle Rudolph, so maybe more time with Irv Smith would have been warranted. But of course, they love Tyler Conklin anyways. So it's really just Lamar Jackson right now that really is the focal point of the COVID scare, essentially. Like, we don't know what's going to happen to the season. We don't know about somebody mentioned their Lamar Jackson MVP tickets. You don't know if those tickets are going to be live this season, because you don't know how often Lamar Jackson's going to appear on the COVID list. So ADPs are going to change quite a bit. I will say COVID's not going to be forever, even though it's probably lasting way, way longer than it should have been.
Right.
And That said, maybe you don't react too much to every bit of COVID news that we get this season, knowing that we are playing Dynasty here and there's many, many, many more years for Lamar Jackson to be in the MVP conversation. So you mentioned Carson Wentz, teased it a little bit there earlier. Carson Wentz to undergo surgery, 5 to 12 weeks, according to Stephen Holder of The Athletic. 70% was the number that the Colts needed, 70% plus the playoffs, in order to be sending their first round pick over to the Eagles. I believe it was 75% without the playoffs, also sends their first over to the Eagles. So 5 to 12 weeks does not look like it's definitely going to be 70%. I mean, that's a very wide range, but you have to assume that the Colts aren't going to push it. Why would they? Why would they push it knowing if he's the long-term answer, which if it were any other coach, I don't think that Carson Wentz is the long-term answer. I believe Frank Reich has an affinity for Carson Wentz. So Carson Wentz might actually be the long-term answer, which has made him a value in Dynasty. And if you believe that, then he's even more of a value in Dynasty now because we have 2-3 more years of Wentz, given the trade value. So if you believe that, then you go trade for Carson Wentz right now. But I will say, don't hold your breath to see him much this year, because if the Colts aren't contending, which they could actually still contend with Jacob Eason with that defense. I mean, you've got Darius Leonard playing quarterback of your defense over there. I would not count the Colts out per se, but if they're not winning a whole lot of games and they're sitting around 500 and it's getting pretty close to that 70%, they're not pushing to get Wentz in. I mean, that's just bad organization level work there.
Right. And let's see. So in the first, 6 games, they play Seattle, Tennessee, and Houston. They have a bout with Miami, good defense, Baltimore, good defense, Rams, good defense. Towards the middle of the season, they've got other games. They got Tennessee, Jacksonville, and the Jets, if I'm not mistaken, throughout the middle part of the season. And then like closer to the playoffs, they've got Arizona, the Raiders, and then another shot against like Jacksonville. So it's just like, with their division, at least 2 of their division mates, like being one of the weaker like teams in the league. Well, Tennessee also has a bad defense, but a good offense. So that's could be a volatile matchup, but still there's at least enough there on the schedule that they could bang out like a decent win total, could wind up vying for a playoff spot, depending how things go. It could be, or at least at the very least, by the time that Carson Wentz is back to action, they could be in a decent enough position that should he wind up at least going, let's say, 500 on like from a win total perspective, once he's back, they could be vying for a playoff spot. So my look at it is, I agree with you, Adam. I do think that his connection to Frank Reich is enough that that entire organization views him as like a quarterback that they want to keep and continue to groom like for the future. So if anybody is concerned currently, if there's anybody in your league that happens to have him concerned about this, the fact that he's going to miss a significant portion of this season, they might move on, toss an offer out, see if you can move him away from that. And if you can also take on the risk of not having him for a significant portion of the season. Hopefully it's in a super flex league where you already have 2 at least established starters, or maybe 1 starter, and then maybe you're banking on Fields or Lance or somebody like that starting like later on the season. You can work with like Wentz being out, that sort of thing. Then at least that provides you at least some top cover to the fact that, you can leverage the idea that he is going to be around for at least the next like 2 to 3 seasons, and you can get at least a, let's say, top 12, no, not top 12, like top 18 quarterback, maybe, like out of the deal in the process. Yeah.
And so a perfect example for a roster that you kind of laid out. I have a roster with just lost Carson Wentz, and I actually have Lamar Jackson, Big Ben, and Zach Wilson. So
there you go.
Kind of the perfect construction to just wait on Carson Wentz and see what happens there. But let's take a walk down Narrative Street under our fabulous mayor, Sigmund Bloom, because this is the Dynasty Newsletter. So we do have to talk about Jacob Eason. He's going to get looks in the NFL. He probably never would have gotten looks in the NFL had this surgery not needed to happen with Carson Wentz. We got a big arm, but that's about it. And those defenses that you just mentioned, at least 5 or 6 of them are probably going to eat him alive. And unfortunately, there's not really another option. So you've got Michael Pittman. It might be the end of T.Y. Hilton's relevance in Dynasty whatsoever, unfortunately, because you're not banking on him playing a full season anyway. So if you get through half a season with Jacob Eason and the team's just unfortunately maybe getting annihilated, then T.Y. Hilton is probably going to not hang up his career, but call out sick for the rest of the season type of deal. There's no reason for T.Y. Hilton to be out there in large bouts. Now, you may see more Paris Campbell, which would be fantastic. This is going to be our first healthy year with Paris Campbell. And I tell you what, you better see a lot of Paris Campbell if you're not going to get eaten alive, because Jacob Eason needs to get rid of that ball quick. And Michael Pittman's not necessarily the receiver that's going to be conducive with that. Now, he was productive on those quick slants and some of those screens, so that will help. But I'm talking more like Paris Campbell making some creativity, giving the defense something to worry about, getting them off of Jacob Eason's back. That's what you can do with Paris Campbell. You can get him on those jet sweeps, fake the jet sweep, do some of that Ram stuff that at least gives the defense something to think about that isn't taking Jacob Eason's head off. That's something that you could see from Paris Campbell. So there has to be some positivity out there somewhere. So that's going to be it for today. I appreciate everybody coming out. And before we get you out of here, just make sure that you're checking in on the Footballguys mobile app. It's available on Apple and Android. I know so many people out there, they like to put on their dark mode. They like to get their night light when you go to set up your phone for the night in bed. Yeah, that's me every night, just scrolling through my phone, and I do not like having to go to the websites. So it's perfectly viable. Go over to the Footballguys mobile app and you get all the content that you normally would at your desktop. But you're laying there scrolling, you get to read your articles in bed instead of sitting up at your racing chair like us. So definitely go check out the Footballguys mobile app. Download that, iOS and Android. We thank you all so much for coming out. For Chris at Chris Allen FFWX, myself, Adam at APWILDE, we will catch y'all next time.
Peace.